Hello everyone, welcome to the March 19th Call of Duty DFS Slate breakdown, look ahead, talk about. Have a pretty interesting series of games today, so let's go ahead and talk about yesterday. A little bit of misdirection there. So we were actually kind of on the right side of everything yesterday. Want to try to speed these videos up a little bit, so talk about these things quickly. London 3-2 over Paris. I was off London anyway because of the map set look and how Bocage was looking. Kind of fortunate they ended up losing the first two maps. Paris have now been reverse swept in two straight series. You can see the Minnesota one down there as well, and London as well. So it's pretty tough for them. Tough sledding for them for sure. But London turned it around. They actually ended up doing pretty okay. London was extremely highly owned. We'll talk about that in a second. But they kind of failed in terms of DraftKings scoring. I do think Bocage was a part of that, and we'll talk about that as well. Seattle Optic ended up winning the series, but they actually got outslayed a little bit here. A good bit, actually. As you guys can see, for the map one Bocage, it absolutely was crazy. Sib went 47 and 28. Absolutely disgusting score there from him. Seattle actually did end up outslaying them pretty handedly, but on the flip side, Optic won this series. So I guess you definitely want the Seattle side there, but Optic still scored well anyway. And then Minnesota versus Boston, the Boston guys actually, got the sweep done. I was all over them. I'm pretty happy with that for sure. Unfortunately, I wasn't on their highest scorer Methods. Methods went absolutely crazy yesterday, but I was on TJ Halley and Capsule, so we're still doing pretty well there. TJ Halley and Methods definitely scoring really well. So overall, very good day. Actually ended up making a good chunk of change. I tweeted out my winnings on my Twitter. That's usually in the description. Doing pretty well. Cashed both of them. I just had two lineups. Just kind of kept it condensed. Just left out London. Went with a 3-stack of Optic and Boston 2-stack, and then a 3-stack of Boston 2-stack of Optic. So it was pretty simple construction for me. Didn't get the right pieces exactly, but we'll take a solid, good, profitable day any day of the week. And then we look ahead to today. I guess quickly, kind of what I wanted to say before we get started with any of this stuff is how much Bocage matters in terms of DraftKings scoring. We preached a lot, so hopefully you guys are kind of already, sick of this or hearing this. But two things I wanted to talk about before we got started on tomorrow's state specifically. I wanted to talk about kind of how DraftKings scoring is kind of integrated into this versus real life odds and stuff. And then Bocage. So we look at Bocage, Hardpoint. We could see everyone on the Seattle team that won over 30 kills. We nearly had double 40 bombs. Pred was 1 kill away. I mean, Sib was nearly at a 50. Like, it's absolutely ludicrous. On Tuscan, you guys could see the numbers are much more tame. I mean, Shotzi did get 37, but there was 2 people over 30 here, and then over here it's 6 people. No, 5. But I mean, it's absurd. Like, the numbers on Bocage that are happening right now are completely ludicrous, as you guys can see for another Hardpoint here. Not a single person over 30, and that's kind of how it goes here. So yeah, the Bocage is pretty crazy. It definitely matters that much. It really, really does, and that's something we're going to continue to hammer down home on. I did find a really, really beautiful spreadsheet here that talks about their map vetoes and maps played. I just found this link on Reddit. Somebody messaged it to me on Reddit. He said it wasn't his, so I don't know who to give this credit to. I can't find like a name or anything on it anywhere. So maybe but it's a public spreadsheet, so I'm not sure in terms of like if I should be using this or not. I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of public information, but it's just placed in together in a nice way. So we'll use it. We'll get some good information out of it. We'll have a good idea of map picks and stuff going forward. Oh, and then the other thing I wanted to touch on was Vegas odds versus DraftKings scoring. There's going to be some instances like this of that today, and we'll talk about that. But like yesterday, we had Boston in a close series versus Minnesota odds wise, but we know Boston was a lot better when it comes to scoring in like um, hard points, because that's definitely their best game mode, and things like that. So we want to keep in mind that these Vegas odds and picking winners isn't necessarily kind of the goal here. It can be. We're not doing great in that department either way. But when it comes to DraftKings scoring, it's a whole different ballgame. I've touched on that a lot already, but remember, the main goal here is to get players that end up with more kills than deaths, good DraftKings scoring. It doesn't really matter who wins. We saw it yesterday with Seattle and Optic. Optic won the series 3-1, but Seattle outscored them pretty hard when it came to DraftKings scoring. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then I guess the third mini thing is battling optimizers and how those things can be a little misleading. So it's kind of a combination of the other two things when it breaks down Vegas odds and maps. The thing that matters when you're looking at like an optimizer versus hand building and stuff is a little bit of the context is lost when you do look at like optimizers and stuff. So when it comes down to hand building lineups, like for example, off the top of my head, off this kind of surface level of this slate, we know London like to ban Bocage. Atlanta FaZe are really good at Bocage. So that means Atlanta FaZe's numbers are probably going to be on average a little bit skewed because, one, they win a lot, which is fair. Two, they play a lot of Bocage, so it's going to be inflated. Their averages are going to be inflated. So if you have an ability to remove the Bocages from their scores, it goes down a good bit. And that's something to remember is when you're going to be hand building and you're looking at an Atlanta FaZe versus London Royal Ravens, there's not going to be Bocage played. London are going to ban Bocage, so that brings down the average scoring a good bit. But are the optimizers going to adapt and understand that? No, they probably won't. I think a good bit of them won't, unless people are hand tweaking and doing that kind of stuff. It's not going to account for that. So Atlanta might end up being a good bit over-owned today because of that. That's kind of the point I wanted to get over real quick. And that's the thing I wanted to talk about. So the first series is, I want to check. Yeah, this is London versus Atlanta. Atlanta minus 240, London plus 188. Kind of quickly going over where they're at the moment. Atlanta, we just saw lose as a gigantic favorite versus Seattle, but that was a little while ago. It was last week, was a week ago, so kind of out of our minds by now, but it's something to keep in mind. Seattle did look decent yesterday as well, but still, something to remember. Then London, they did beat LA Thieves a week ago, looked really good then as well. However, they got down 0-2 against Paris. They did end up reverse sweeping and winning the series, but something to keep in mind. They did get Gizmo back, so maybe there's a little bit of readjusting there, but either way, that's something to keep in mind. And the reason I want to talk about these maps so much is when we look at the team stats here for Atlanta FaZe and London Royal Ravens, when you do look at their map scores, you're going to see that London obviously don't play Bocage. It's the map that they're banning out, that they're not going to. And then Atlanta FaZe, that's the only map they play and they're extremely good at. So when we look at these hardpoint records, London are 5-2 on the other three maps that we know have a good possibility of being in. We know there's not going to be Bocage because London banned Bocage. So we have a team in London that is 15-6 in hardpoints. And then we have a team in Atlanta FaZe that is 8-7 in hardpoints. You guys don't have to be a rocket scientist to see which of these teams is doing better in hardpoint. 15-6 is a lot better than 8-7. Don't know if you guys knew that, but there you go. That definitely matters a lot here. And we could see maps vetoed, FaZe typically banning the Berlin, some Gavutu. They're obviously wanting to get to Bocage or Tuscan, let their submachine gun players run wild. Did I go over it? Oh, Ravens is blue here. They banned Bocage, so most likely we're going to see Berlin banned and Bocage banned, so the two hardpoint maps are going to be Tuscan and Gavutu. Pretty quick and easy way to look at this. Tuscan and Gavutu, Atlanta FaZe are 3-3 and 4-3, so their combined record of 7-6. Again, London 5-2, 5-2, combined record of 10-4. Again, do you guys have an idea of what record do you think is better between 10-4 and 7-6? Probably London's 10-4. I mean, it's not rocket science here, guys. And we know how much hardpoint matters when it comes down to DraftKings scoring. You have 2 hardpoints in a series, and then hardpoints are 2 of the 3 respawn game modes, and respawn game modes account for like 90% of DraftKings scoring. So when it comes down to it, yeah, I'm gonna favor the team that does more in hardpoint. The caveat here is, again, with no bocage. We know the maps are going to be Gavutu and Tuscan. We know London is kind of overlooked here in these hard points. Again, 10-4 versus 7-6 doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. So I think all the value is actually here on London. The Search and Destroys are kind of close on both sides. Hopefully, I wonder what is London banning in the Search and Destroy. They banned Tuscan. That's kind of bad. Phaser banning either Tuscan or Bocage, so they'd probably ban Bocage. So the Search and Destroys will be Desert Siege and Berlin. London is really good on Desert Siege, bad on Berlin. Atlanta's also good on Desert Siege, average on Berlin. So definitely Search and Destroys are favoring FaZe. When it comes to controls, FaZe ban Gavutu, London ban Tuscan. So that kind of comes down to a coin flip. We won't know who can ban that. There's going to be one of the two, coin flip, whatever. But I think London have a decent advantage in the hard points. I think Atlanta have a slight advantage in Search and Destroy. And then when it comes down to control, it's a coin flip. So all these things considered, I like London's money line here. I think they're a little undervalued. I think this is a close match, a good bounce back spot for them after somewhat of a disappointing series yesterday. But again, quickly, no bocage. It's pretty much a necessity at this point for DraftKings scoring. I'm going to take some slight London maybe, just because they are pretty cheap. Afro at 74. London is cheap, and they're probably going to be overlooked, I think, because, again, Atlanta is super cheap. Selling him at 78 is going to pop. He should be, super highly owned. Beezy's 9K. He's affordable. You can get these FaZe guys in. I think people will, and I like taking the leverage you get with London. Not going to be too heavy on them again because, like I said earlier, no bocage. Moving on to the next one, we have New York and we have Paris. Again, quickly, New York is making a roster swap. Again, this time it is a little bit more significant. They are getting rid of Clayster and they're bringing in Paul X, who just substituted and what's the word? Limelighted? Spotlighted? I don't know. He was shortly with London, filled in for them for a week. Actually played pretty well. They're getting rid of Clayster. He is an overall veteran, good presence leadership-wise in the team, but his individual numbers are extremely lacking. You just could see he's at a pretty poor in both game modes. It is going to be Neptune, Hydra, Crimsix, and Paulex. I actually like the sound of this team a good bit. I was honestly a little surprised when I saw these odds. I was going to expect Paris would actually be the favorite because we've seen a little bit more from Paris. They've had some decent results in these past couple of games. But I think the upside just is a little bit there with New York. The main thing here is, again, the reason I've liked New York in the past is because they've had a lot of actually decent close hard points, and they're actually good in Search and Destroy and Control. Their boon, he doesn't, again, look at these records. There's 0-13 in hardpoint. The boon for them is hardpoint. They're very, very poor in it. There's no arguing that. You get rid of Clayster, who's played really, really poorly in hardpoint. You bring in somebody like Paulex, who actually looked pretty good in London. Hopefully they just get a little bit more of an individual boost there. And I don't think they're necessarily lacking leadership or veteran presence because Crimsix also brings that himself as well. So it's I feel like it's kind of just as rude as it sounds, it just is a sheer upgrade going from Clayster to Paul, because they don't need Clayster's leadership or voice or anything like that, because I think that's something that Crimsix can provide. So I think a little bit more of the leadership and veteran presence is going to fall on the burden of Crimsix. I think he maybe takes a little bit of a hit individually, but I think it should enable Hydra, Neptune, and Paul to all do pretty well individually, because they're playing with better players now. So if people are picking up kills around them, it's easier to group up, collapse on enemies, do things better together. The main thing again is I think New York actually played a lot of close, winnable hard points earlier in the year. I think they're arguably a little bit of good variance away from winning some of these hard points, and it's a whole different conversation. So the slight, the boost that they get, I think from Clayster to Paul, I guess, is gonna help them out individually, and I like that a lot. So although the odds aren't great, I honestly thought Paris was gonna be the favorite here. I just think the upside is there for New York. I think they have a lot more ability to win the control, that's for sure. It's not like Paris is great in any aspect either, so I think that New York has a little bit more upside, a little bit more venom to them. And the main thing again here is New York is actually really cheap. I think Neptune at 7, Pollux at 6.2. Hydra's expensive, but if you're pairing up Hydra with Pollux or Hydra with Neptune, then the average is going to be pretty cheap there. So I like them. Looking at the bans for these teams, we're not sure because New York might change some stuff up, but they typically ban the Berlin or Gavutu. Heading over to the Paris Legion, right next to them, conveniently. They kind of ban across the board. That's a problem, but there's a chance. There's definitely a possibility here. If New York bans Berlin, then maybe Paris will ban Gavutu and they end up on Tuscan or Bocage. I think there's upside there. I mean, Bocage was banned once by New York, twice by Paris, so there's some real chance. There's some real upside there. I think Bocage watch. It's possible, not a lock, but it's possible. So when we look at the upside there, we know New York is going to let through Tuscan Bocage. We know Paris can play those. We don't know what Paris is going to do, really. The possibility's there. That's all. I'm just going to leave it at there. So for the controls, they both ban Tuscan, so Gavutu control's not ideal. But again, I like the possibility of getting what was I on? There we go. I like the possibility of being able to get a Tuscan and Bocage. Maybe if Paris banned Gavutu and then New York banned Berlin. I think New York should ban Berlin. I just don't know what Paris is going to ban. If they go ban the Gavutu, or if they ban the Tuscan, or they ban the Bocage, I'm not sure. But the possibility is there for a Tuscan and Bocage, or even if we just get a Bocage, that's good enough for me. So I like letting the New York subliners, letting their submachine guns go to work, like Neptune, like Hydra, like Paul. Probably going to leave off Crimsix, because again, I think he's going to be more of the leadership, more of a voice, and that typically tends to take a hit on your individual stats. So that'll be it from that series. Heading over to Texas versus Florida. We can pull up these individual stats here. So I actually had to mull this one over for a while. It might be a little bit surprised by that, but I'll talk about it here. So this one's a little weird because Florida, the last two times we've seen them, they looked great, but that was against a very, very, very lackluster, probably worst team in the league, New York team. Again, a little bit revitalized and new now. But then they also stomped LAG. We don't really know where LAG's at the moment. They seem pretty inconsistent as well. Texas, or Optic Texas on the other hand, they played to a close 3-1 win over Seattle, then a close 3-2 win over LA Thieves. Both pretty decent teams. But I think if you look at the context of like where's Florida compared to Seattle and LA Thieves, I think they're kind of close. Looking at the league as a whole, you'd probably have The top group, I think, is London, Optic, FaZe, not in any order. A second grouping would probably be teams like Boston, Seattle, LA Thieves, and I think maybe even Florida, because Florida have been looking pretty decent lately as well. So I think when you look at the grand scheme of things, I don't think Florida versus Texas is that far apart. You could see Optic is a minus 350 favorite. I think the main thing that it's coming down to here as well is going to be the map vetoes again. So we have Optic banning 2-2-4-3. So they have 2 Tuscan bans, 2 Bocage bans, 2 Gavutu, or 4 Gavutu, and 3 Berlin. So again, a really, really solid map set here that they like to get to. They like the Tuscan, they like the Bocage as well. They typically ban the Gavutu and the Berlin. Florida, they never ban Bocage. They can ban the Tuscan, Gavutu, Berlin. I think the most likely scenario here is that they do get to the Bocage, which matters a lot. I think both of these teams are confident in their Bocage. It's going to be a good match, a good map, hopefully. The main concern here is the second one, because Mutineers do ban Tuscan. That's probably going to be what they ban. I would imagine Optic either ban Berlin because they're 0-4 on it, and they'll take the chances to their Gavutu. I'd imagine what the map set's going to be is Florida pick Bocage and then Optic pick Gavutu, but maybe it's the other way around, and then I'd imagine Florida ban Tuscan and then Optic ban Berlin either way. So I guess it doesn't matter. So I think that's going to be the ones. I think it's Bocage and Gavutu, either side. So yeah, I think when we look at that context, I think Bocage decent for both these teams. 5-2 for Florida, 4-2 for Optic. Optic have been looking a little slow lately, but that's a little tough on them. Again, we do a similar exercise. We look 4-2 on the Bocage, 2-1 on the Gavutu. That is a record of 6-3. For Florida, they're 5-3. Gavutu might get a little ugly, but again, I think we have a Bocage, very possible Bocage. For when it comes to the control, Florida ban Gavutu, Optic ban Gavutu. So we're definitely going to get a Tuscan control here. If we're having a Tuscan control, a Bocage hardpoint, and maybe a possibility of Tuscan, I'm not sure what Florida will ban. I think they should ban the Tuscan. That would make a lot of sense for them. So we have Tuscan control, we have a Bocage hardpoint, and then we have either a Gavutu, maybe a Tuscan, I'm not sure. But definitely a Bocage, definitely Bocage hardpoint, definitely Tuscan control. So I like this series a lot. And again, this one feels a little weird to me. I could see this going either way. I might have to look into it a little bit more and make a decision. This one's probably going to have to be tweeted out a little bit later tomorrow when I talk to some people and try to get a little bit more info on it. Again, this one is just like, I think Texas are a lot better. It's like, how much stock do I want to put into Optic kind of looking shaky against 2 good teams in Seattle and LA Thieves? Like, Seattle's been looking a lot better lately. Is it kind of a blip in the radar? Is Texas, did they just kind of look a little shaky yesterday? It was kind of just one map. I'll definitely note that. Texas did look a lot better in maps 2, 3, and 4. Map 1, they looked really shaky. I don't know, that's like what it comes down to. On the other hand, Florida beat the crap out of LAG in New York, but it's like, how good are LAG in New York? Like, we just kind of don't know. My lean is definitely kind of just towards the Optic side for now, but that might change. And this map definitely qualifies under the Bocage watch situation. Pretty likely going to have a Bocage, so I like loading it up in this Optic versus Florida series. Gonna have to pick a side, probably be Optic, but it's kind of up in the air still there as well. The final series is Boston versus Toronto. Pretty interesting one here as well. This again, I think, is one of the situations where I was talking about earlier, how the odds I feel a little misleading when it pertains to DraftKings scoring. So we look at Toronto; they've been really poor in hardpoint, 6-10, and then we have Boston 12-8. Looking at bans, Boston Breach are banning Gavutu hardpoint. We love that. They're leaving out typically the Berlin or Bocage. When it comes to the Toronto Ultra, they ban typically either the Gavutu or Tuscan. I mean, we know if Boston bans Gavutu, then most likely Ultra will end up banning the Tuscan. Uh, I'm not sure on that one because I think ultimately, I don't know if Boston's Tuscan is that much of a threat. I think I think what will happen is Toronto end up banning their Berlin. They are yet to ban it, so that is a little concerning. That's a possibility. That's just kind of what it comes down to. Is Toronto should ban Berlin, but they have not done it so far, so we just don't know. I think again, either way, um, we know Boston loved to get onto the cage there. Toronto only one bocage ban. We're probably going to see a good chance of seeing the bocage here as well. Sorry about that. Throat's getting a little dry. Um, yeah, like we this one's a little tough. Again, after the bocage, it's a little dicey. We don't know whether it's going to be the Berlin Gavutu Tuscan, but I think we're overthinking a little bit. I think all that really matters is the bocage. It seems really likely here. Neither team banning it. One of these teams is going to pick it. It just comes down to what's the other map. Whether it's Tuscan or Berlin, it does matter because Boston are much better on the Berlin as opposed to the Tuscan. But I think either way, it kind of leans towards Boston in those hardpoint respawn game modes. Um, the control definitely in the favor of uh, Toronto Ultra. They've only won 3 coin tosses. They've banned Gavutu twice and Tuscan once. Boston have banned Gavutu 3 times and Tuscan twice. I think either way, you're definitely favoring Toronto a lot in the controls. So that's kind of like the negating factor there. That kind of leads me towards being a little bit more conservative on this Toronto Boston series as a whole, because although I like Boston to do well in these respawn game modes or in the hard points, their controls are a lot worse. And I do think Toronto still do possess a little bit of ability and upside to doing well on the bocage. So if Toronto can put up some respectable scores in the bocage, win the control, maybe spring an upset on one of the 2 hard points, I think that Toronto's looking in pretty good shape there. So I like Toronto a little bit. Again, it's tough. Like I don't know. Like if I like New York. Am I just going to leave off London and Atlanta? Probably not. I want to get some of the London leverage because I expect Atlanta to be somewhat owned. So are they? I mean, Optic's the biggest favorite, but I mean Atlanta's good bit favorited there as well. So I don't know. Like, part of me just wants to leave off this Toronto Boston one because Boston's probably better in the hard points, but Toronto's better in the controls. So I just do not know. I just do not know. And another thing to remember, Toronto only beat Minnesota in hard points. And Minnesota is really bad in hardpoint themselves. So we very well could have a 4-10 record here with Toronto in hardpoint. Search and destroys are going to be close. Toronto's definitely favored in the control. I don't know. This one's close. I probably, I'm going to take it back. I'm just slightly lean towards the Boston side. I think they've been a little bit better on the cage, despite their record being worse. I don't know. Actually, that kind of does change things. Because if we see the Bocage, Toronto's actually been winning that. Did they play that? No, they didn't. They haven't even played Minnesota for that. So they actually have been somewhat decent on the cage. We know they're going to win the control. This one's pretty risky because I think it's super dependent on the map. But I think if they do get to the cage, Toronto have a good chance of winning the cage. They're going to win the control. If you're telling me Toronto are most likely going to win 2 respawns, then they're probably in a better position overall. So I'll take Toronto slightly in there, not loving it either way. Pair them up with the likes of New York, maybe some sprinkle of London. Still a little torn on the Texas-Florida one, but I'm probably just going to end up leaning Texas. I like the upside that they've shown in the past. So yeah, that'll be it for me today. A quick kind of run through, but I'm actually pretty pleased with that. I'm pretty pleased we talked about the teams and stuff. I guess individual players. Kind of talked about New York, leaving off Crim 6 probably, but I think I like Hydra. I like Pollux is super cheap. Neptune would probably be the third guy in there for those stacks. For London, Afro's super cheap. I like him. He's been doing pretty well. It's kind of tough between Nasty and Gizmo. Kind of feels like flipping a coin there. Um, I guess that's my slight lean would be towards Gizmo, but I think getting a 3-man of Afro, Nasty, and Gizmo as a decent shout as well. They'd probably be my 3. I'd probably leave off 0. Texas versus Florida, it's always going to be Shotzi and Dashy at the top. Illy will probably be my 3rd guy in as well. Although, if it's Bocage, Scump's actually been doing pretty well on the cage. We'll look at the player stats there. So, Bocage, hardpoint player, Scumpy, 31 and 33. Illy is at 27 and 31, so he's a little bit worse down there. I'd slightly lean towards Scumpy, I guess, in that situation. I'm trying to remember what the other maps were I had in that Florida Texas series. Let's see, what are they doing in control quickly? Optic ban Gavutu, Florida Mutineers ban Gavutu. So we're getting a Tuscan control. That's what I was remembering. Illy is 23 and 24. Scump is 27 and 24. So actually looking better for Scump. Scumpy will be my 3rd man in. I don't love that though. It's kind of a 50-50 between Scump and Illy as who performs well. Maybe it's a salary thing. If you need the extra 1,000, you go down to Illy. I think that's fine. Maybe if you can get up to Scumpy, I think that's fine as well. But I think it's definitely Shotzi and Dashy top 2 there for me. Toronto, Boston. This one is a little tough because Toronto's team has been kind of like all across the board, like neutral. Maybe I shouldn't have closed that, but whoops. Again, typed that wrong. I don't know why. So we go to the cage. Hardpoint. We have Bance, 30 and 22. That's Cammy, 32 and 30. That's decent. Insight, 26 and 26. How does that even happen? I mean, that feels a little skewed because of one bad performance, but that's still pretty bad overall. And of course, Kleenex, the other submachine gun, 32 and 32. So probably leaving off Insight. So I think honestly I'd go with Bance and Kleenex and then Cammy. But again, that feels a little tough. I wonder who's doing well in the controls. Again, that's Cammy and Bance. Looks like Kleenex is a little bit towards the bottom there. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that's kind of tells us all we need to know. So that'll be it for me today. Kind of a speed run, but I actually feel like we got a lot of info out there. So hopefully you guys managed to use this. Again, kind of reiterate all the stuff we said earlier. Make sure to look at the game modes as opposed to the Vegas odds. Make sure you're looking at the maps as opposed to the odds. Make sure you guys have good context on all the situation and stats you're looking at. Remember, not all stats are the same here. Like FaZe's numbers are going to be super inflated because they play Bocage, but they're not going to have Bocage in this series, so keep that in mind. And yeah, keep in mind all that stuff we talked about earlier. And best luck to you guys. I will see you guys tomorrow. Hopefully we can keep the winning streak of today going in, or yesterday, I guess, technically, into tomorrow and the next day and go from there. Yeah, best luck to you guys tonight, and I will see you guys tomorrow.